In this video, we'll be discussing separation techniques. To study this topic, the knowledge of mixture is needed. Mixture is a substance that is made up of two or more constituents that can be separated by physical means. So we still have other terms that we are going to be using. Element is a substance that cannot be splitted further by any chemical means. One compound is the combination of two or more different elements which cannot be separated by physical means. Since mixture contains two or more different constituents, each of which retain its individual property, its individual characteristics, it means that to study one of the constituents, that is one particular substance in that mixture, we have to remove it, separate it from other ones that are now known as the impurity. That one that we needed, that we want to study, is the pure substance, is the one we want. So every other ones that are included there will now be regarded as impurity. So this is where the knowledge of separation will be employed. And there are some characteristics, there are some properties that will help us to choose the particular method that we will employ in the separation of that substance, in separation of that particular one that we want. Some of these properties that will help us to pick separate, because we have different methods of separation, physical methods of separation. So we will have to choose correctly the one that will help you to perfectly separate that one that you want to study. So the things that will help us to make choice of the method to employ are something like the size of the particles. Take for instance, if we have, let's assume we have beans mixed with rice. You know that the size of the beans and the size of the rice are not the same. So in this case now, common sense will tell you that if you use a sieve that has the mesh, that the mesh is that hole that is in the sieve, that has the mesh through which rice can pass through, but beans cannot pass through it, that you can easily use it to separate the rice from the beans. So you can see how size will help us to pick the method that we can use in separation. Another of that kind of properties that will help us in picking method, we have boiling point, we have density, we have solubility of substance in the solvent, we have miscibility, we have magnetic properties, and we have sublimation, that is the ability of the substance to sublimate. Now, we will list some of these physical techniques, that is physical methods of separation, and we'll be picking them one by one in terms of illustrations. Okay, these are some of the physical methods of separation, that is separation techniques. When we have sieving, filtration, evaporation, sublimation, distillation, fractional distillation, crystallization and fractional crystallization, chromatography, precipitation, decantation, magnetization method, and the rest of them. Just as we have said, we'll be discussing them one by one. Let's pick sieving method first. Sieving method is the method of separation used in separating solid particles of different sizes. This is, you just put the mixture in a sieve with a particular mesh depending on the size of the particles, and the smaller particle will pass through the mesh, leaving the bigger particle in the sieve. In this way, you have separated the mixture. So this method is employed in mining industry. It is used in mining industry to separate gold from diamond. It is also employed in garri industry to separate the particles before marketing. Next will be filtration. This method is used to separate insoluble particles from liquid. Take for instance, mixture of chalk dust with water can be separated by this means. And the apparatus needed are glass rod, filter paper, 2 beaker, retort stand, and funnel. You have to fold your filter paper and put it inside the funnel. Then set up the apparatus with the aid of your retort stand. Then pour the mixture, that the chalk suspension, inside the filter paper in the funnel, and the water will pass through. The clean water will pass through the funnel and the filter paper, and this will be called filtrate. While the chalk particles will now remain inside the filter paper because it cannot pass through, and that will be called residue. We use diagram now, a sketch, to illustrate what we have just said. Okay, this is the sketch illustration of what we have just said. This is the chalk suspension, the mixture of the chalk dust and the water. This is the funnel. The first beaker is containing the suspension. The second beaker is what we use to harvest the filtrate. Then these particles now that are remaining, here is the filter paper. Filter paper. So these particles now that are remaining on the filter paper inside the funnel is what we call the residue. I hope this is clear, right? Let's go to the next one. The filtration method is used in brewing industry and also in water treatment plants. Even at home, you use domestic filter to purify our drinking water. The next is evaporation method. This method is used to separate the solutes from solution at the detriment of the solvent. We said at detriment of solvent here because the solute will remain in evaporating dish while the solvent will escape as vapor into air. Let's use diagram to illustrate it. In the lab, water bath or sand bath is used in the laboratory to ensure steady rate of evaporation. This is the sketch illustration of evaporation method. The salt solution is poured inside the evaporating dish and placed over water bath that has been heated. Then you continue the application of heat. Then the paper wedge here is to allow the steam that is coming from the water bath to escape. That is, it creates gap between the evaporating dish and the container of the water bath. That is. Then you have your wire gauze, you have the tripod stand, and the source of the heat, which is the Bunsen burner. Method of evaporation is applied in salt industry. Those that are living within the coastal area use this to produce salt, as in to get salt. They pump the salty water from the sea into the trench and they evaporate it under the heat of sun. But one thing is that salt obtained by this process contains impurity like magnesium chloride, which is delicent, thereby attracting moisture from the atmosphere and gets a bit diluted. So it will make then the salt to cake. There are some salts that when you see them, it will seem as if somebody added small water inside it. Sometimes you will see it will be in a block form, and that is like some parts of it will block will be like they are molded together. In that case, we say that the salt has caked. That happened because of the presence of that magnesium chloride that attracts moisture, absorbs moisture from the atmosphere, and then added moisture to the salt and make the salt to cake. But this can be removed by addition of sodium tetroxophosphate. This will now react with the magnesium chloride to form magnesium tetroxophosphate. In that case now, the salt can stay dry without caking. I hope this is understandable. The next method is sublimation method. Sublimation is the process by which solid particles changes directly into vapor, into gas, without passing through liquid phase when heated. In this case, the solid will turn when heated, it will change directly into gas. It will turn into vapor. And when the vapor cools, it will turn back to solid without melting. And when this kind of a thing happen, we say that the solid have sublimed. So there are substances that sublime. These substances, examples are sulfur, iodine, benzoic acid, ammonium chloride, iron 2 chloride, anhydrous aluminum chloride, naphthalene, and the rest of them. So this method is used to purify such substances that used to sublime in the industry, especially where they are found mixed with other substances, as in their mixture. So we are now going to use diagram to illustrate what we have just said. This is an inverted funnel. This is evaporating dish, the wire gauze, the tripod stand, the heat, and the salt mixture. So you can see this is cotton wool. This cotton wool is used to prevent the vapor from escaping. So is that vapor now, since it was not able to escape like that, so it will now cool because the temperature here and is cooler than the temperature here. So when it cools within this area, it will get deposited. It will turn back into solid and get deposited at the walls of the funnel. So, and this is now, we call it, these ones here are the sublimates. I hope it's understandable. Okay. Okay, the next method is distillation method. This method is used to recover solvent from solution. The solution is heated and the solvent vaporizes and turns into liquid, that is condenses into liquid called distillate when it passes through condenser. This method is used in gin and water distilleries to produce gin and distilled water respectively. So we are going to use diagram, that is a sketch, to illustrate distillation method. Okay, this is laboratory setup for distillation method. This is the solution of the mixture. When heated, the solvent will turn into vapor. And since there is opening, you can see that there is cork here. So the vapor cannot pass through any other place apart from this place. So it will pass through this pipe. And when it enters the light big condenser, there is always water inlet from the tap. Because of this vapor passing through this place will always be very hot. But the water from tap now will, when it circulates, it will reduce the temperature of this area, thereby making the vapor to cool. And when it then cools, it will condense in form of liquid as liquid called distillate here. And then the water now that enters the tap, from here now it will go out. You can see water outlet to the sink. Then you get your distillate, and that is it. The next one is fractional distillation. The apparatus for simple distillation is the same thing with that of the fractional distillation. The only difference is the fractionating column that was introduced between this distillation flask and the condenser. Remember that as the solvent distills over into the distillation flask, that is into this flask as a distillate, the impurity and any other solvent that is the other impurity will remain here, so you get your solvent. This is laboratory setup for fractional distillation. You can see the fractionating column being introduced between the distillation flask and the condenser. Fractional distillation is used to separate more than one miscible liquid with close boiling point, but the boiling point between the successive fractions must be more than 10 degrees centigrade. Fractionating column is divided into several compartments, each with specific temperature and perforated tray. And the temperature at the upper part of the fractionating column is lower than the temperature below at the lower part of the fractionating column, such that the liquid with the lowest boiling point will distill over first. When the distillation flask is being heated, liquid with lowest temperature boiling point will turn into vapor, will boil first, vaporize, goes into vapor, and ascend, enter the fractionating column. And when it comes up, it will enter the condenser and get distilled. Any other liquid whose vapor comes up that is not up to the boiling point of that of the upper part of the fractionating column will get cooled and condenses back into the distillation flask. This process will continue until the liquid with the lowest boiling point have completely distilled over. Then the temperature will continue increasing until it reaches the temperature of the boiling point of the next liquid. Then that one will enter into vapor and goes up into the condenser and starts distilling, while every other one whose temperature is not up to that of that particular boiling point will be condensing back to the distillation flask until the second liquid within that particular temperature has been completely distilled over. Then the temperature will continue increasing again until it reaches the temperature of the next liquid. That's how it goes. We know that crude oil, that is petroleum, contain many natural products such as the kerosene, the petrol, the bitumen, the negroin, and more of others. These components of this petroleum are being separated. Each of them is being separated from the petroleum using fractional distillation. The next to talk about is the crystallization method.